I'm in Kendal, and it's a little village of 830 people, and it's 4 hours north of Sydney. And it's winter at the moment, so it's freezing here.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah.
North of Sydney. Wow, interesting.
Yes.
I didn't know it got that cold.
Compared to America, I guess it's not. But still, we get a frost in the morning on a cold morning, so that's cold.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's always weird because I have had on my bucket list to go to Australia, Fiona, and I have never been there. I've traveled to 40 countries and I haven't been to New Zealand. I've been to Australia or New Zealand.
Wow. Well, you've got to fix that.
I do have to. So, how did you land up in Kendal?
Well, I was living in the Blue Mountains before, in Little Hartley, which is the name of my record label, and it was actually a divorce. I moved in with my parents in Newcastle for a while, as you do. You always go back to your parents' place.
Yes.
A grown adult I was 45 at the time, and living with my mum and dad, and then I met Sebastian Gross is my husband, my new husband, and he lived in Kendal. So, of course, that's how I ended up here.
Well, it sounds like a charming, just from the name, I can picture a charming town. It sounds like a charming place. And
it's beautiful. It's got a river that goes through the middle of it.
Oh.
It's 15 minutes to the ocean, so it's kind of up in, at the foothills of the Comboyne Mountain. It's really lovely.
Well, let me give people a little background on Fiona Joy. I'm so happy to be talking to you. I've been emailing you and seeing you on Facebook for years, and I love all of your music, and you are just such a special, angelic being. Your music is truly inspiring. Your voice is heavenly. And this last year, you've just been going all around the world. You did this New Age supergroup Flow, which stands for the names Fiona Joy, Lawrence Blatt, Jeff Oster, and Will Ackerman. And of course, that was the great artist that did work with Windham Hill. But you also got a chance to play New York Carnegie Hall with accompanying Deepak Chopra. Oh, I just love Deepak. And got to do that. You have so many beautiful, beautiful albums out, and you've been so many recognitions and awards that have been given to you. And you've toured China 3 times. My gosh. Now, I want to hear, we're going to talk about that and how that happened. And you've got you got a new release you're going to be doing also, don't you? It seems to be just a constant revolving door of writing, recording, releasing, and I've got CDs in every one of those stages at the moment. So it's a lot of work, but that's what I do and that's what I love doing. So I enjoy keeping busy. And traveling a lot. And you've got to work with some wonderful people who love you, including Jeff Haynes, who's with Pat Metheny, Tony Levine, who's with Peter Gabriel and Dire Straits, and many other. Oh, and I always love Paul Winter Consort, and you get to play with Eugene Friesen, who was with them. Yeah,
I've been very, very blessed to work with amazing people, and of course, producer Will Ackerman. Very, very blessed. I think it's helped me. It's helped to get obviously my music to a better standard. Working with that level of session musicians, but also it's been such a learning curve because I started writing music when I was 8 years old.
Oh my!
And I didn't really understand where my music fitted until I heard George Winston, and that was when I was in my early 20s, and I suddenly realized that I was writing new age music. So I feel like I sort of fitted into that world, working with the Windham Hill people, and how one thing leads to another before you know it. That's the world that you're in. So I've been very fortunate.
And it's such you have such a blessing in your music and your voice. I really feel transported, and I've been researching more and more how healing and helpful music is, and I feel it's so important for people to hear music that lifts their spirits, and that's what your music does.
Thank you. Sometimes I feel like for me, it's a way of getting, my thoughts and images and emotions down. Some people might use pen and paper, and I kind of do it at the piano. And I worry sometimes that it's my expression of life, and sometimes even my sadness that goes into the music. And yet, often people find beauty in sadness and sadness in beauty, vice versa. And so they'll hear my music, which may be an outpouring of my own emotions, and they'll take that as being something very beautiful. So it's interesting how music speaks to us all in a different way.
Well, no, that is really true, and that's the magic of the music and what happens. I have to ask you the question, since I do listen to this song every day, 600 years. What is the story behind that song?
What I wanted to do with that album was to take a handmade Australian piano and record it with ancient instruments from around the world. So I wanted to sort of bring the village into sort of a more global thing. So it was my answer to globalization in a way, in a musical sense. And so I wanted to bridge time, distance, and history. And Will Ackerman, my producer, asked me exactly the same question that you're asking now. And he said, Fiona, just write it down. Just put it on paper. What are we doing here? We're bridging time, distance, history. So I said, well, I imagine that I'm standing on the shores of my ancestors, who are all Irish and Scottish, and I'm calling across the water. So, 600 years and I'll be home. The end is the beginning. The winds may whisper. So it's that idea of standing on the shores and calling across the water through time, through history, through distance. And that was where those words came from.
Isn't that interesting?
Whisper, 600 years and I'll be home.
So you really reached into your ancestral DNA and that thread and in that song and kind of made a soul connection.
Tried to, yes. And I think that's why it's got that kind of eerie, reaching through time sort of feel to it. And that's also the Irish whistle, because if you're using a contemporary handmade piano with ancient instruments, then in that song, obviously the voice is the most ancient instrument of all. So there's voices in that, and there's also the Irish whistle, which is a very old Irish instrument. So
yeah, well, it does definitely have that feeling, and you are a beautiful being, not only in your soul but in your whole demeanor and body and looks, and you just are able to carry that so well. And you've made a lot of friends. I mean, just by touring. You tour, quite a bit this last year. You just finished a very long tour, didn't you?
I did. I spent 9 weeks in the U.S., and we started at the New Orleans Jazz Museum, and then we went to Seattle, and then we played in San Francisco, and then we played at the Grammy Museum in L.A.
Wow.
And then I'm going back in September, and we're playing Nashville, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and then back to Carnegie Hall on the 28th of September.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lot of touring, and it's a lot of fun, and I actually quite enjoy being on the road. I think I might have a little bit of gypsy in me. Maybe that goes back to the DNA as well.
Maybe, you know what, you have to be able to love doing what you're doing. You and I think Wouter Kellerman, he's always, because he's in South Africa, and he has to travel so far to get anywhere as well. And Australia is a long hop, to get from there to New York to Carnegie. How long a hop is it for you to go, or you just try to do something close by first?
Well, okay, interesting you ask that, because when I was flying home, I was in Vermont, which is the East Coast. So imagine that's, getting home from New York, same thing. Mm-hmm. It took me 52 hours door to door.
Oh,
that's not usual. That's not.
Oh, God.
I know. By the time I got home, I was a total wreck.
Oh,
but
my.
What happened was I had to fly through Charlotte, and there was lightning, so the plane got stuck on the runway. That meant that I missed my next flight. Because I missed that, I missed my connecting flight to Sydney. So then I had to buy another flight, and then it was another 24 hours. And I rang my PR person, Beth Hilton, who you know quite well.
Yes.
And she's amazing. And I said, Beth, 1 a.m. this morning, can do you mind if I catch a taxi to your place and sleep on your couch? And she was amazing. She was there and she greeted me with, fruit and yogurt. And because I was it was ridiculous. It was crazy. I'd started at, 6 that morning, and then at 1 a.m. the next day I landed at Beth's place, and I've still got to get home to Sydney. So it's a long, long way. It's 15 hours just to LA from Sydney.
Oh my gosh! So I have a book, and actually I just did an audio book called "How to Fly with Less Stress," which has meditations, relaxation exercises you can do in the seat of your plane. You got to get it. We got to get it to you because it's very, very hard on the body as well. What do you do? Wearing these long flights? Do you just listen to your music, or do you listen to music to zone out? What's your trick?
What I try and do is I get to the airport early enough, always early enough to go to one of those express spas, and I have a 30-minute neck, shoulder, and back massage, so that when I get onto the plane, as soon as the plane takes off, you get your meal fairly quickly, and then I just try and go to sleep. If I can't go straight to sleep, I just watch a movie and then I'll sleep the rest of the way. But 15 hours is such a long distance.
It absolutely is. So, what were you doing your CD flow on? What were you featuring on this last trip?
The last trip was a little bit of everything. I recorded an album with Blue Coast Records, which is a high-resolution album recorded to DSD, and it will be released as a super audio CD. Oh. And that was Blue Coast Records are content partners with Sony for high-res, and they're based in San Francisco. So I spent a week there and recorded an album. Then I did 4 songs I did the tour with Flo, and then I recorded for a week with Flo towards the next album. And then I recorded for another week on my own independent label, Little Hartley Music, for my next album, my next studio album. So 3 albums in the works and a tour, and it took 9 weeks. Plus, I did a concert myself in New York.
You can do an album in a week, huh?
No, I just got the piano down.
Okay, it's like, wow, that's pretty impressive. I have a little bit of piano music we're going to play. This is from Into the Mist. This is the audio file edition, but we're going to be hearing it here, and we'll talk a little bit as we listen to this here. This one, again, is very mystical, kind of misty. What's the story about Into the Mist?
Into the Mist is... It's kind of, once again, it's obviously about mist and water and that kind of that veil of it. I was really thinking about Scotland. Oh. I've never been there.
You haven't been?
No, my grandfather immigrated to Australia when he was 8 years old. So it's a direct line. He's from Stirling in Scotland. And somehow or other, once again, back to the DNA, I do feel quite connected. So... there's a lot of reference in my work to that whole Celtic thing.
Well, you know what? You have to go. You have to go. I haven't been there in a while, but I loved... I went to Ireland a couple years ago. I'd been to Scotland before that, and I know I have that in my roots and DNA. And there's this amazing feeling when you get to a place that you have always felt connected to, and you finally get there. It's almost like that, what you said, coming home. It's almost like that coming home feeling. I know that you will resonate with that. Of course, you have to go at the right time of year. Talking about getting cold. You don't want to go to Scotland in the wintertime, I don't think.
Don't I? Oh, okay.
No, it gets cold. It gets cold in Scotland.
Maybe it's part-time DNA, just summer months only.
You have this very mystical, ethereal sense about your playing and your music and your whole being, which is just very, very lovely. So this last tour, how do you, when you're doing a tour like this, it's kind of, I'd say it takes a lot of stamina to be on that road that long. How do you stay centered when you're doing that much traveling?
It does take a lot of stamina, and I think the thing that exhausts me the most is that when you go on stage, you give your heart and your soul to the music, to the audience, and you feel a little bit flat sometimes afterwards, particularly the next day. You wake up and you sort of...
Drained.
You've got to fill yourself back up. You've got to fill yourself back up in a way that you can have something to give to the audience the next night. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is the hardest thing. And yet I love that challenge. You know, I've got a little mantra before I walk on stage that I say, dear God, you gave me this gift. Please help me to share it with the audience as best I can. Mm-hmm. And that way I don't put too much stress on myself for being nervous, you know, with mistakes and that sort of thing. It's not about me. It's about giving the music. Mm-hmm. But just in that process of giving the music, it is completely exhausting. And it's interesting, I've talked to Will Ackerman about that, and he feels a very similar thing.
Yeah, so you just turn it over to God, and you just do what you're doing as a channel for that music.
Yeah. You just do the best. You just give everything that you've got to give on that day. And sometimes, you know, I wish I could work out what makes a great performance so that I could bottle it, but I never can. You know, sometimes I can be really tired and not feeling that great, and I'll do a great performance. And then other times I'm completely on it. I've had lots of sleep, you know, and I just won't connect quite as well. And I'm never sure whether it's the piano, the space, the audience, me. But, you know, I really give everything I've got in any one given performance to do the best that I can on that day.
I think
that is the most exhausting thing.
Well, I think it's a little of all of the above. Even when I write every morning, I meditate and I write every morning. And sometimes I'm just sitting there going, well, I don't know what I'm going to write. What am I going to write? Maybe I shouldn't even write today. And then I just start, and then something else takes over, and whatever comes through, I'm going, well, where did that come from? I didn't feel inspired. I didn't know that I felt inspired, but then this stuff comes out.
Exactly. Right? Yes. Yeah. Sometimes it's there, and sometimes it isn't. And when it's there, you go with it, and you just take it as a gift. And when it's not there, you just say, well, there's no gift today. So today I'm going to do scales and piano practice and keep my fingers moving. And it's the weirdest thing. Sometimes you almost feel like there's an angel sitting on your shoulder. Yeah. You know, there's somebody that's channeling something through you, so that you're just the conduit. But it's a very interesting thing, and that artists and writers like yourself, we all talk about the same thing. So I wonder what it is.
Well, speaking of an angel sitting on your shoulder, what was it like? I think Deepak Chopra is an amazing being, and what an inspirational man. What was it like, and what were you doing with him at the Carnegie Hall?
He has such a lovely aura about him. Well, we were actually recording a 40-minute live TV show that went out to his audience, which is something like 50,000 people live.
Wow!
Just like listening to it live, and then of course it's there ongoing, and probably has had millions of people watch it. So I was part of the house band. So I was playing with Will Ackerman and Tom Eaton and Jeff Oster, and we were really just channeling. We were getting into this zone, into this kind of groove zone, while these beautiful meditations and chants and poetry were being read over the top of what we were doing. And we were literally improvising. But we were, when it was interesting, because we did it for about 20 minutes. We played while the poetry was going on and the meditations. And then at the end of it, we didn't want to stop. We were just in this kind of zone where we were almost in another world. It was really lovely. It was a really beautiful experience.
Did you hear his release that was out last year called Home, that he did with Paul?
Yes,
and
I did. Yeah.
Wasn't, now talk about it. That was so inspirational and so
beautiful.
That
was lovely, and that was the time of the release. That's basically the project that we were. A lot of it was about that project. So,
how wonderful.
Really, really lovely work.
And you also, and I have to talk about this because you know what? I love interesting jewelry. And you started a line, Fiona Joy Jewelry. And it's very upscale. Is it pronounced Swarovski?
Swarovski crystals,
Swarovski
and then it's got little love hearts with Fiona Joy in it. It's really cute. It's foot jewelry, because I play barefoot when I play the piano. So often I'll put this foot jewelry on, and then at least your feet don't look quite. I'm calling them barefoot sandals.
Oh, I
They're
like
really
that.
Sweet. They're really lovely. And then I've got a matching wrist bracelet because when I play the piano, you're sitting sideways to the audience. There's not a lot happening. There's really only your clothes and jewelry. There's not a lot of movement when you play the piano. So I try and have some sort of crystal, something that catches the light that's on my wrist. And that's why I wear this particular jewelry. And it's been very popular because it's really sweet. It's really pretty.
So is that on your website, FionaJoy.com, or is that a separate thing?
I believe it is on my website, and I'm fairly certain it's available on my Facebook shop. Not sure. Definitely on my website, FionaJoy.com. You'll find the jewelry there.
And it's funny because I was, actually my father was born in Prague, and I was back there, and I always have loved crystals on top of that, but they have beautiful crystals, crystal jewelry in Prague and everything. And
I love crystals.
I do. The way it captures the light.
The roof,
in the house. Yeah, no, it's absolutely beautiful. So I appreciate the fact that with your busy schedule, you were able to also create a line of jewelry, which is nice. Very nice. Now,
I'd like to do more of it. Yeah, I enjoy doing that sort of thing.
Well, it sounds like your life is so very, very busy, though. I mean, here you are doing all these projects, but also on the road. When you get back to your hometown finally of Kendal, what do you do to kind of just reconstruct yourself to get back to enjoying your place? And I imagine you're always very happy to come home as well, right?
Yeah, it takes me a week just even to unpack my bags. I usually sort of, that expression, crash and burn?
Yes.
That's what happens when I get home. I've usually done so much overseas that I am run down physically and mentally. And it takes me a month, really, to get my strength and get myself back on track and start being productive. But the weird thing is that the more vulnerable I am, the more likely I am to write music. So often some of my best music comes from that sort of period where you're exhausted and you're a little bit flat, you're just a little bit overtired. And sometimes my best music comes from that. So I try not to complain too much about the downs, because you've got the ups and the downs, because the music has to come from somewhere, and sometimes that's where it comes from.
Yeah, well, there's that old, in the Zen philosophy, a lot of just sitting there and not speaking and sitting and sitting and sitting and sitting for hours comes to the point where you can just kind of have that breakthrough as well. So there is something to that when your guard is down and you're like exhausted sometimes.
Yeah, you get a little bit more contemplative, you're digging, you're reaching a little bit deeper. There's something about that state of vulnerability that brings you closer to art, and I almost don't like it because it's not a great way to live your life, having to be a little bit down or a little bit anxious or a little bit overtired to connect more with art. But, I actually said once to Will Ackerman, whatever will happen to me if I get happy, will the well of music dry up? Because everything I write's in a minor key and it's all very sad and digging very deep. And he said, no, Fiona, the well of music won't dry up. You'll just discover the major key. You'll just start writing happy music. And I've written a couple of happy songs, but I can say I can count them on one hand.
Well, there's a difference between down and introspective. I don't feel any of your music is down. I feel it's all very introspective and connected to your soul. And I've never felt any of your pieces were down at all. Reflective, yes. Introspective, yes. So I don't think you're in that space ever, although it must have been hard because you did go through a divorce. And I have to say, knowing many musicians and artists, some of their good works come through hard situations that they're in, because that is a creative outlet, right, that happens, that does really connect you when you are down and you're looking for help, and that comes through the music many times.
Yeah, and you particularly hear it on my last album, which I'm not sure if you've got a copy of it yet, Story of Ghosts. It's only just released a few weeks ago with Blue Coast Records. And Story of Ghosts is actually about my year last year, which was actually pretty awful. I mean, we all have years like that, where you lose a close friend and
you lost a very
close
friend. There was a story. You wanted to share the story of that one?
Yeah, I did. I had a business partner, Dunny. I went to boarding school with her, and we were best friends, and we were working together as well. And she passed away last May, and that was really, really sad and really hard for me because we're the same age, and we have children the same age. So that was last year. And my husband's father, who I was very close to, passed away just before that. So it was just one of those years where, and a few other things happened. One of my sons had a few issues as well. And I turned, real life into art, and I wrote Story of Ghosts, and it's got titles like Story of Angels, Story of Ghosts, Story of Insanity. And, I just kind of channeled all of that, thinking very deeply about how that affected me, and just channeled it into music.
And it's interesting because I'll try to write as positive as I can, and everything in New Age is positive vibrations, which I totally appreciate. But sometimes I'll write things about how difficult or weary or tired I'm going, and people relate to that more. It's like, oh, okay, I can really relate to that,
Yes, it's real life as art, and you know what? There is beauty in sadness, and I think sometimes if you've got enough distance between you and whatever it is that's been an issue in your life, you can bring the beauty out of it, and you can, pass on a positive message. I guess that's what we're all trying to do, is write it down and turn it into a story that other people can relate to, and that's never an ugly thing because nobody wants to listen to ugly music. So you've really got to turn it into something beautiful that still tells that story.
Now, instrumentals mainly, but singing as well, right?
Yes, I do. I sing, and mostly I use voice as instrument, which is what we do in New Age. But I do have some singer-songwriter songs as well. But in New Age, it's also a little bit different because there's going to be less words, and it's more as a layer, I guess, than you would have, say, in folk music or pop music. So it's using the voice in a different way.
Well, you have a lovely voice. I mean, you have an
absolutely thank you very much.
Oh, and again, in that song, 600 Years, it's, again, very ethereal, beautiful voice,
Somebody actually, for the first time, I've always wondered, why do people tell me I've got a beautiful voice? I'm not that, I'm not that sure about it at all, really, but Will picked it, and so did somebody else, that I have a harmonic overtone when I sing. So it's almost like that whole Tuvian thing of you sing one note and there's a second note that comes out, and it's a fifth, and it's an overtone, and I've heard it a couple of times now.
Interesting.
So there's something different about when I sing, and I don't know whether it's every note I do. I've never explored it. I've never listened to it. But even Tom Eaton mixing has said it sounds like there's multiple voices there.
That's we'll talk about ghosts, right?
Yeah. Well, if you listen to Once Upon Impossible off Signature Synchronicity, that's just me singing by myself. No auto-tune, nothing, but it sounds like there's multiple voices.
That's amazing.
That's the song to listen to hear that example.
So let's talk about Australia, because this is a place I haven't been, and I must have 4 travel books that I bought about it, because I was going to go, and then something came up and I couldn't. But the Blue Mountains, that's supposed to be one of the most amazing places to go that many people love to travel to. And, of course, you go to Sydney, and some people, of course, don't give themselves enough time, which is part of the problem. You need a lot of time. Tell me about the Blue Mountains now. What do you know, and tell me about your story about being in the Blue Mountains. Well,
the Blue Mountains are 2 hours west of Sydney, and the highest point is 3,000 feet, and that would be, say, Katoomba, Blackheath. But just really, really beautiful mountains. They're called Blue Mountains because the oil that comes off the top of the eucalyptus trees gives it kind of this blue hue from a distance. So it really does look quite blue. They really do. and they've got a lovely feel to them. That you can do beautiful walks down into valleys and canyons, and the Three Sisters, of course, are just gorgeous because they're quite sort of a red colour, and you just get these kind of amazing vistas and colours. And I've always felt that the Blue Mountains are a very special place. We're going to be going back there. My husband and I are going to do some walking because it's a great place to, try and get fit. Going up and down mountains.
When you do a walk in the Blue Mountains, how long do you walk for when you go out there and say you're going to do some hiking?
Well, there's one particular walk, and it's 1,000 steps. So you start in Katoomba at Echo Point, and you walk down the 1,000 steps, and then you walk along the valley floor for about 45 minutes. And at the other end, there's actually a cable car that's still there from back in the mining days, where you used to go down to the mine in the cable car. It's still there, so you go back up on the cable car. And then usually you can't walk for about a week afterwards because your legs hurt so much.
I think that sounds like a very nice thing to do, actually.
It's a great thing to do. That's what we're planning.
I couldn't walk up 1,000 steps, but I might be able to walk down 1,000 steps and walk across.
Oh, you've walked down 1,000 steps, believe me, the
really?
next day. Oh, my gosh, yes.
Are they easy steps or are they slippery? Do you have to watch your step on each step?
They're not slippery, but they're very, very uneven because they've been cut into, sandstone and rock.
Uh-huh.
And there's something to hold all the way down,
uh-huh.
but a lot of them are quite large steps, so you're really using your leg muscles. Otherwise, you're just going to hurt your knees. It's not an easy walk at all.
You need good shoes, right?
You need good knees, good shoes, good leg muscles.
I don't think I want to damage my knees on a hike that would do that. I mean, I can almost feel it, right? I was like, oh, my God. You get down 400 steps and they're going, what do I do now? I've got to keep going down. I'm not going to walk up 400 steps.
Yeah, you kind of get to the middle point where you're totally committed. You've just got to keep going. But it's so beautiful, and I tend to not stop. So
you just keep going.
You can do it slowly. You can sit down on the way and you can, smell the roses, as they say. But I tend to just sort of go 100 miles an hour and do it way too quickly.
But it's going to be cold because you're going there in a few weeks, you said. So it's winter. It's going to be cold, right?
Well, actually, I'm going in October, so it's going to be a lot warmer.
Oh, good. And where do you stay when you go? Do you just stay with friends? Do you stay in a bed and breakfast, or what do you do?
The violinist that plays on a lot of my albums, she lives in the Blue Mountains, so often I stay with Rebecca Daniel. Mm-hmm. She used to be in the Australian Chamber Orchestra, so we've actually got a concert this weekend in Warhope, which is nearby. So Becky lives up there, and that's a perfect excuse for me to go and visit Becky and stay at her place.
Wonderful. Now, if you were going to recommend to someone a place to stay there, where would you? Because I am going to get there one day, and hopefully soon. What would you recommend? Where do you recommend staying up there?
Well, it always comes down to budget. If you want to go high-end, there's the Fairmont is really beautiful, or any of the hotels at Echo Point are really lovely.
Echo Point.
But I often just go Airbnb.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Because there's lovely little houses, gorgeous little places to stay, and just find something that's got a nice view, and there's views everywhere.
Wonderful. Now, do you have good transportation getting around, or what ways do you get around? Now, obviously, you've got a car, but if do you ever do, you don't lift that far, but what kind of transportation do you like to take when you're getting around Australia?
I go by car or plane. It's a very big country. The footprint of Australia is the same as the US. Mm-hmm. So that gives you an idea of how long it takes to fly across the country from, say, Sydney to Perth. It's a long way. So we do have a good train system. You can catch a train from Sydney up to the Blue Mountains very, very easily.
Oh, really?
You don't need a car. Uh-huh. And once you're there, it's easy enough to get around.
Uh-huh.
But I drive everywhere because where I live is 4 hours the opposite direction. So it's out in the country, and the trains, take 4 hours to get to Sydney. So I tend to get in my car and play a CD and work or make notes or edit notes while I'm driving.
Left side of the road?
Yes, the opposite to you.
Yeah. Do you have a problem when you rent cars and drive in America getting on the right side?
I never have a problem in America because I learnt to drive in America. I lived there when I was 21. and my first car I had in America. So for some reason, I go back there and it feels normal. When I come home to Australia, I will often pull out on the wrong side of the road.
Interesting.
I have to actually get myself into the space here, whereas over there it's natural to me. That's really strange, isn't it?
No, it's very, very, very interesting. And when you do things in places like New York, do you like to stay in big hotels, or do you like to prefer small, or you go Airbnb? Or what's your comfort for traveling and staying in hotels?
Anything, depending on budget, anything from couch surfing through to the Knickerbocker on Times Square, depending on who's paying the bill.
Well, that is something to think about, and I'm glad you brought that up because, when you're traveling a lot, the expense of traveling can really add up, obviously.
Yeah, it really does come down to budget, what concert I'm playing, how much they're paying me. It varies. My favourite place to stay is the Knickerbocker on Times Square. I love that hotel. It's really lovely, and it's just a quick walk up to Carnegie Hall. When you're playing there, but New York is horrendously expensive. I can't believe.
Well, I went to the Grammys this year, and it was in New York. And of course, being from Maui, living now in Maui 30 years, I'm used to it being warm. And I have to say, going from 80 degrees down to 13 degrees was really, really hard. And I ended up staying at the Marriott and in Times Square. And it was fine. It was really, they were very nice, and a lot of people were staying there from the Grammys. But it was really quite a trip walking around. I mean, I don't know. I think I was on the 34th floor or something. But, we don't have any hotels that big on Maui. So, and there's so much going on, right? And you go to Madison Square Garden, it's like, my gosh, So it was quite interesting, and the energy level is so different than here. But when you're a musician and sensitive like you are, you have to really kind of have, like you said, that gypsy spirit, I think, to be able to maintain your energy field, because you got to be performing and being able to get back in that no matter what you've been going through,
And you have to like just being by yourself, and I think that is the most restorative thing is, I'm happy to go back to a motel room by myself and be in my own space, and that I find that quite grounding. So as much as I say I like being a gypsy and going in and out of airports, I think it's probably the ability to sort of move through the world by myself in my own space and totally independent is what keeps me quite grounded. I'm not looking for other people all the time. That's not my thing.
Well, it's always interesting on piano because obviously you're not going to take your piano with you.
Yes.
And there you are with the piano. And you're subject to what I'm sure Carnegie Hall is a very good piano, but I imagine you're subject to all kinds of different pianos you've got to play.
And that's a really good point. Everybody else gets to take their instrument, and I have to play whatever I'm given. And sometimes you would think a really beautiful space would have a really beautiful piano, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes the action's quite firm. It's hard on your fingers. Other times, like I actually played at quite a big venue in Boston once, and there was a missing note.
Oh, no.
Like in the bass. There was a note that just got stuck down, and it was a brand new piano. I won't tell you the make because I'm sure it's not their fault, but something had happened and this note got stuck down, and that's the sort of thing that you have to deal with, and you just have to be able to roll with it. Another time, the piano had been tuned not to 440. I think it was maybe more like 443, which might be, for a concert performance with an oboe, you'd tend to tune the piano a little bit higher. But the rest of the band are all tuning to 440.
Yeah.
So you never quite feel like you connect with what everyone else is playing. So you have to be able to cut off what they're playing, focus on what you're doing, and know that there's something about the vibration that's not quite right.
Wow.
And you don't have any choice because you have to play the piano you're given.
Wow, interesting. Well, it's wonderful talking to you. I mean, really, I just love your music, and you're such a wonderful person as well. And I know you're 4 hours behind me, and the next day tomorrow. So I appreciate
something like that.
I appreciate you doing the math. And when you come out to Hawaii or Maui next, we'll have to have you come stay and play.
I would love to do that. I'd really love to do that. That would be wonderful.
Oh yeah, no. There's Peter Cater lives here, And we do have some nice, wonderful musicians. Carlos Santana has a house here, but he's on the road a lot. But we have Mick Fleetwood and many wonderful musicians, actually. Loved Steven Tyler and others. Love to live here. It's a very wonderful, beautiful place on Maui. But again, it's not an easy place to get to other places from because we're right here in the middle of the Pacific. So we always have to be flying somewhere in between. Even going to New York was this is a long flight. And
it's a change of worlds, isn't it? As you were saying, it's a different world.
So we're going to see next. Your next release will be out when?
My next Story of Ghost is just come out. I'm just sort of promoting that one at the moment.
Okay.
The next release, the one that I've just recorded the piano for, the album's going to be called Moving Through Worlds. And it's got, a song that I wrote when I was 12 years old called For the Roses, which I will be recording again. It was on my first album, which was a keyboard album. So I never quite did that song justice. And I sort of wanted to do almost like a retrospective in the sense that you starting from the beginning of your career and having a smattering of songs throughout your career, right through to improvisations you do on the day. So it really is a representation of my career, but with some totally new songs in there as well. And I've recorded the piano for that at the moment, and I'm just working on funding and crowdfunding and sponsorship so that I can complete the album. And I'm hoping for this time next year, or maybe by the end of next year.
And people can go to FionaJoy.com, see all the amazing releases that you have out, check out her beautiful crystal jewelry, and get an idea of what you're up to. And it's a real treat. I just really have to say thank you. I'm going to play a little bit of your music here for a minute as we go out. And thank you so much to call in from all the way from Australia. Great talking to you and connecting.
Thank you, Cindy, for having me. I feel very blessed. Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Nice talking to her. Fiona Joy, really, truly a beautiful person, beautiful singer, beautiful pianist. And I want to recommend also you checking out How to Fly with Less Stress. It's on Amazon now. You can get it as a book. You can get it as a Kindle. You can get it as an audiobook, all three available. And I think it's really helpful with what we see happening with the travel industry and flying these days, with the seats getting tighter and tighter and more people jammed in. It's really nice to be able to find something to read or listen to that's going to reduce stress and bring you a little peace of mind and a time to actually retreat in a nice, joyful zone. Thank you for listening. A big aloha.